All right, fellas, let's close out today's show with our Roto World player news. Denny, we could talk the big game last night, Eagles-Patriots, where we saw a million different quarterbacks play. But I think what everybody cares about with this one is the quarterback competition in New England. Jacoby Brissett brought back there as a bridge guy. Drake Maye drafted third overall to be the future of this franchise. Where do you think this one stands? Because, we've had some interesting quotes we've heard from the new coach, and, NBC Boston's Phil Perry has had Drake Maye talk about the quarterback competition, that it's not going anywhere. They're not committing to Brissett right now. But we also know when Drake Maye was a prospect, this is a team that wants to break some of his bad habits and not thrust him into an offense where there's significant questions on that offensive line right now.
Yes, and right now I think Brissett still has a good chance to start the season as the Patriots starter, but it's gone from absolutely Brissett is the QB1 going into week 1 to there might be a competition if Drake Maye continues to play well. So I think, hey, another good performance for Maye. He wasn't outstanding against the Eagles. He did have a rushing touchdown, which is cool for fantasy. Jacoby Brissett had a horrible pick in the end zone that the Eagles returned to midfield. So that I think that we're starting to see it turn around. It really is, like, on a team that's not going to win like the Patriots, it is a matter of time until Drake Maye gets the starting job. And really, guys, this changes everything for the pass catchers, for the running backs in this offense, because Jacoby Brissett, he is a statue, okay? My guy is not running at all. He's not taking off. He's dumping it off to running backs. He's dumping it off to tight ends, to short area guys from the slot. Maye is running. Maye is throwing deep, okay? He's being more aggressive. This changes the dynamic for everybody in this offense. So we have to keep that in mind when we're drafting Patriots players. I think that Maye's involvement as a rusher, inside the 5 or inside the 10-yard line might be an overall negative for a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, who I like. I like his ADP right now. I'm taking him in some drafts. But I don't love him if Drake Maye takes over. I'd rather have Brissett in there.
The change of tone is a really important point, Denny, of how they've kind of viewed this. Going back to the quote that NBC Sports, Phil Perry, Boston's Phil Perry got, just Mayo on the quarterbacks was, it felt like you said, it was transitioning so much from, no, Brissett's the guy until he's not, and now it's looking like, well, definitely still a competition here. So it just feels like the tone is changing. Jay, from a fantasy perspective, that is really interesting because with Drake Maye, the rushing upside, and we didn't see as much of it as final year of college. We saw more of it 2 years ago where there was a time people thought he could be the number 1 overall pick or number 2 overall pick. That's something that he's going to have to do in this offense because they simply just don't have enough juice and weapons where he could stand back there and just throw every time.
Yeah, I think my preference, probably your preference, Planet Earth preference is for Drake Maye to get in there.
I'm actually, from a football perspective, I don't prefer it. From a fantasy perspective, I do. Watching their tackle situation last night and what I've heard from people like Phil Perry, who does such a good job for NBC Boston, all the reporters out there in Boston, it's maybe the worst in football. And for a guy that had bad habits mechanically in college and took a lot of hits because he has to do that, I don't know if that's the best football move, but Jay, I agree. From a fantasy perspective, it's not even close. It's Drake Maye.
I just think from an interest perspective as well. I feel like I know exactly what Jacoby Brissett is going to be. And the other thing with Brissett, I think his reputation was lifted a ton by that year in Cleveland when he was filling in before Deshaun Watson came back. That year in Cleveland, though, he had like one of the best offensive lines in football. He had Nick Chubb in his absolute peak, and he had some receiving options, and a good play caller in Kevin Stefanski.
Absolutely.
So he was set up to succeed, and this is not that situation. You mentioned the offensive line is very bleak, doesn't have skill player weapons to the extent that he did in Cleveland either. So I just think it will be Maye's job at some point. That seems inevitable. I would think it would be week 1, if not for the fact that the Patriots, their first 8 weeks, the schedule is absolutely brutal in terms of just teams and defenses they have to play. They got to play the Jets twice. They got to go at San Francisco, Miami, Houston. They got to play Seattle, who I think is going to have a really good defense under Mike McDonald. They start the season at the Bengals, significant dogs in that one. So I just wonder if they're going to throw Jacoby Brissett to the Wolves,
yes.
And then bring in Drake Maye maybe around mid-season when they go Tennessee, Chicago, and home to the Rams at that mid-season break. So that would be perhaps my expectation, though it's all trending Maye's direction.
So with all that thought process, Denny, is there a receiver here that is fantasy relevant? I mean, we saw KJ Osborne starting. Jalen Polk only played 2 snaps with the starters. As good of a summer he's had after being a top 40 pick. Is there anybody in this pass game that matters, quite frankly?
Wow, it's a tough question, Connor, because I don't really have a great answer beyond maybe Osborne. He seems to be, maybe the wide receiver one, which is really an indictment on this team and this roster. I'm not sure about the Jalen Polk usage. It kind of freaked me out last night. They only got 2 plays with the starters. He's a guy who I've been very interested in as a late round receiver, especially if you need receivers late in the draft, someone to plug into like a multiple flex spot roster, that sort of thing. But you have to be wary of that. I guess Hunter Henry, hey, he's still playing, and he could catch a bunch of short dump balls from Brissett or May or whatever. But beyond that, it's hard to really mine any fantasy production from this New England roster, I think.
So, Connor, with the skill position players that New England does have, and look, there's no marquee guy there clearly, but there are a lot of guys there between Pop Douglas, Kendrick Bourne when he gets healthy, Hunter Henry. Do you think that Jalen Polk, are there worlds where he can establish himself as wide receiver 1 on this team?
I think he's the most talented. I thought he was the 5th best wide receiver in the draft. I mean, we had the conversation about how good Jalen McMillan has been this summer. Polk took a lot from him last year in the Washington offense that surprised everybody by going to the national title game, right? Playing with the quarterback that was drafted in the top 10. So when I look at Polk, he's somebody that can play inside and outside. He can make all the tough possession catches as well. And when you look at the way they're kind of gravitating, it feels like not, if Drake Maye is going to play this year, it's when is Drake Maye going to play this year. I think it's the same exact thing for Jalen Polk. This is New England. Yes, Bill Belichick is out the door, but they haven't completely lost that identity of, the way the rookies come in and OTAs, they wear weird numbers. You'll have like a corner wearing 59, and they slow play this. And they're going to do that with Drake Maye. They're going to do that to a point with Jalen Polk. But at some point, if you start the season 1-6, like you need to turn the page. What are you getting from having, maybe a KJ Osborne getting 11 targets a game? You need to see what you had. You didn't use, Jalen Polk wasn't the 120th pick in the draft, okay? He was a top 35 pick in the draft. And him and Drake Maye, the good news is, with the way New England does things, they've had reps together this spring, and they've had good reps together. So Jalen Polk, he might not be a thought in September or even October, but Denny, this feels like a New England team that they're just going to want to see what these guys have probably in November and December. And Jalen Polk is that version of their wide receiver room as to what Drake Maye is to the quarterback room.
That's a good point. It could be a lost season by, I don't know, November 1st for the Patriots, and they'll just go from there. Jay mentioned how tough their early season schedule. That's brutal schedule. So it could be a whole half a season with Jalen Polk profiling as the wide receiver 1. We'll see how that goes. I mean, if they win a few games early, that probably is not great for Polk, but we'll see. We have to keep that in mind. So he might be a stash. He might be a stash in deeper leagues. But really right now, I think that you're probably just wanting to target guys in, more high-powered offenses or offenses that might be able to score any points, which I don't know about the Patriots this year.
So not a ton from the Philadelphia side of this game besides Tanner McKee looking quite good, even as the number 3 quarterback for the Eagles. But, Denny, the question the world is wondering this offseason, is the tush-push still alive in Philly?
Look, we have spent, on the Roto-World Football Show, we have spent all season analyzing whether Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, is going to keep the tush-push the most efficient unstoppable play in all of football, okay, with Jalen Hurts, I should say. It is funny when other teams try it with a quarterback who weighs 60 pounds less than Jalen Hurts and can't leg press a tank, like Hurts can, and then it fails and they say, oh, the tush push doesn't work. No, it works with this guy, okay? So we wonder, is Kellen Moore going to keep that? It appears that they might. I'm leaning toward yes, because last night the Eagles actually ran a tush push on 4th and 1. It was disastrous. It was a fumble. Everybody's falling all over each other. It was terrible. But, I don't care. That doesn't matter. It's a preseason game. It was the QB3 in there. if Hurts is continuing to do the tush push, it means a lot for his fantasy value, and it's very bad for Saquon Barkley. I have some stats to share with the folks here. Last year, Jalen Hurts had 16 rushing attempts inside the 5, 13 touchdowns on those rushes. Only five players had more inside the 5 rushing attempts. DeAndre Swift only had 9 rushing attempts inside the 5. So we're talking about really like chopping out a bunch of touchdowns from Saquon Barkley's fantasy floor here. They also don't really target the running back with Jalen Hurts, with this Jalen Hurts offense. And, I'm very hesitant to take Barkley where he's going, or even if he drops in drafts, honestly.
Jay, as we head into the weekend here, give me one preseason game you're looking forward to and why.
So it's Raiders-Cowboys, and first of all, in that game, the Raiders are 6.5-point favorites, which Antonio Pierce was destined to lead a preseason team that is 6.5-point favorites. For people who don't know, most preseason games, if it's like a 1 or a 2-point favorite because it's a coin flip, but Antonio Pierce, smash mouth football in the preseason. I'm just interested to see Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, who separates themselves in that battle.
Denny, what do you got your eye on this weekend?
Yeah, I want to see Colts Cardinals. I want to see how the Colts handle their wide receiver rotation with Josh Downs out. Josh Downs might be back for week 1. I kind of doubt it. It was a very serious ankle injury. I want to see how they handle Michael Pittman. I want to see what they do with A.D. Mitchell, with Alec Pierce. That'll be something I'm watching very closely.
For me, guys, I want to see Bryce Young against the Jets because all the early reports this summer of Bryce Young is that things look much more promising, and why that's great, and you'd rather have that than the opposite. I want to see what it's like when the actual lights come on. You have a real pass rush. You're not going to see any advanced coverages, especially what the Jets do during the regular season, but just this is a team that went out and bought an offensive line. They've added weapons at wide receiver, Jay. At some point, we got to see something from Bryce Young, and it starts this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. Big year for Bryce Young.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.